my very first meeting here, when Coach Saban had retired and Kalen comes in and I walk in the door a couple days later and meet with the defense, this is as good of an opportunity as there is out there in the game right now in terms of what we can show from a defensive standpoint, because Coach Saban really over the last 2-3 decades, whatever you want to call it, has set the standard of what college football should look like from a defensive perspective. And when he walks out the door, there's most certainly going to be questions about what does the defense look like moving forward.
The actual decision you made to leave a head coaching job to be a coordinator here, how'd you come to make that decision?
I think anybody that knows my time in Mobile, Alabama, at South Alabama, I absolutely loved that city. I loved that university, loved that football program, those players. I thought we were building some really special things. But when you look at the opportunity that is Alabama football, right, and to take over the defense for the greatest defensive coach, arguably in the history of the game, right, and Nick Saban, and to have that opportunity to do that with Kalen DeBoer was just such a special opportunity that I was not going to turn down.
Before we get to the pod, I want to tell you guys about my favorite way to fire on sports, Prize Picks. Guys, I've tried all the different apps, sports betting, daily fantasy, fantasy sports. Prize Picks is by far the best way to get action on sports. On Prize Picks, you pick players instead of teams, so it's tons of fun, and if you know how players are going to perform, you can make tons of money. Each player has a set stat projection, and you pick more or less based on how you think they're going to perform. For example, Steph Curry, 20 points more or less. If you think he's going to have more, you pick more. If he has less, you pick less. You pair it with some other players, and you can win up to 100x your money. It's fun, it's easy, and you can have massive paydays. The best part is I have a $100 deposit bonus for you guys to try it out right now. Use my code ADAMB or the link in the description. You get a 100% deposit match up to $100. So if you put $100 in, Prize Picks will give you $100. Now you got $200 to play with. I'm telling you guys, I've tried it all. Prize Picks is by far the best. And of course, guys, supporting my sponsors helps me a ton, allows me to travel around the country. So it means a lot to me if you'd support Prize Picks using code ADAMB or the link in the description, download the app, and then get that $100 deposit bonus. Let's get to the pod. Appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll just go like 15 minutes, shoot the shit a little bit. Cool.
Be good.
We good, Thomas?
Yes, sir. Awesome.
Cool. Coach, excited to talk to you. Excited to have you on. Wanted to ask, how's the transition? I mean, you didn't have to move far, right? But,
no.
but definitely a transition going from head coach to coordinator.
Yeah, for sure. It's been. I would be lying if I didn't say it was a whirlwind the last 5 months, but really fun at the same time. I mean, there were so many things that I enjoyed about my time at South Alabama and being a head coach and the players and those recruits, and that's always hard to be able to, to walk away from that. And yet at the same time, being a defensive coordinator, presents new challenges. You get to know these players. I think we've got a great group of guys. They work their tails off. They're football nerds, meaning that they constantly are wanting to know more ball. And there's certain things as a head coach that maybe at times you don't get to spend as much time on the football front. And so I've really enjoyed just kind of diving back into our defense and setting an expectation for our players and what we do schematically and seeing them lean into it has been really fun and rewarding for our defensive staff.
Is there anything you think of during your couple years at South Alabama that you kind of learned as a head coach that now you feel like has helped you now to be the D coordinator here?
Well, there's probably too many lessons to count, right? But I would say, I think when you sit in the head coach's chair, you recognize how important it is to protect the time for the head coach so that he can be efficient for everybody else in the building. And I think you also recognize that no one sees the angles from every which angle that the head coach does at 30,000 feet, right? He has all the information. He knows all the dynamics that are at play within the football program. And so just hearing the vision and anticipating what the head coach needs, I think going back now as an assistant, it's made me a better assistant coach after my time as a head coach. And so you learn those things, those things. It's all about actualizing the vision of the head coach, right, for your program, and having people that can lean into that. But for me to do it in that seat and then now step into a coordinator role where I can assist, Coach DeBoer has been really, really enjoyable for me.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about your first unit meeting here as a D coordinator. When you're meeting with your defense, what are you saying to the unit as far as standards, philosophy on defense? Kind of take us inside that first day one, like this is the base level of what we're going to be on defense.
Well, I told the guys, my very first meeting here, when Coach Saban had retired and Kalen comes in and I walk in the door a couple days later and meet with the defense, this is as good of an opportunity as there is out there in the game right now in terms of what we can show from a defensive standpoint, because Coach Saban really over the last 2-3 decades, whatever you want to call it, has set the standard of what college football should look like from a defensive perspective. And when he walks out the door, there's most certainly going to be questions about what does the defense look like moving forward. And you can see that as a challenge, right? And you can see that as a bad thing. But if you see it as a challenge, you see it as an opportunity, right, for these guys to gain exposure for themselves, for us as a defense. What we're going to do as a group. And I think, Coach Saban has been really supportive of us and has been really great to me as we've made this transition, helping me kind of lessen the curve, right, the learning curve from what they have done the last few years to what we're going to do now. There's a lot of similarities in that, but also, right, to be able to have that opportunity to go and stand in and be the next guy right after Coach Saban and be the next group of guys right as a defense is something that I think is a special opportunity for our players.
The actual decision you made to leave a head coaching job to be a coordinator here, was that, what went into your thought process there? How'd you come to make that decision when the opportunity came up?
Well, I think anybody that knows my time in Mobile, Alabama, South Alabama, I absolutely loved that city. I loved that university, loved that football program, those players. I thought we were building some really special things. And I think under Major Applewhite's direction, they're going to continue to do some really special things there. But, when you look at the opportunity that is Alabama football, right, and to take over, the defense for the greatest defensive coach, arguably in the history of the game, right, and Nick Saban, and to have that opportunity to do that with Kalen DeBoer was just such a special opportunity that I was not going to turn down. And so, there were numerous other opportunities that I turned down, even some head coaching roles, right, in some other places. And so, but to do this here, I thought was just too great of an opportunity to pass up, and one that I've really enjoyed since I've taken the job.
I just asked Coach Sheridan this same question about offense, so I want to ask you about defense. When you look at evaluating being efficient and elite on defense, what are kind of the categories that you're looking at when maybe it's post-game, maybe it's stat categories? What do you kind of, offense is maybe points per possession or points per play? What is it for you on defense?
Face value, right? Scoring defense just in general, right? Like finding ways to stop people, right? Whether they start the ball, the drive on the 1 yard line or the minus 1 yard line, doesn't matter, right? Just finding ways to get off the field. I think in order to do that, right, you have to be situationally, special. I think you got to be able to get off the field on third down. I think you got to look at red zone and what you're able to do in the red zone. Some of the overall red zone numbers, I think, can be a bit skewed. When you really look at it, are you holding people to field goals? Are you limiting the amount of touchdowns that are actually scored down in the red zone as well? And then, when you get into some of the the other auxiliary things, but they're huge numbers. We talk about the double positives all the time. So the turnover margin and explosive plays, you want to win those two categories, right? And Major Applewhite, when he was a graduate assistant at Texas, did a study years ago, and we brought this to South Alabama. We used to always talk about it, but when you win those two categories, I think the winning percentage was closing in on 86%, 87% winning percentage when you can win both those two categories. So for us on defense, taking the ball away is a huge opportunity for us, and it's a huge point of emphasis. When you can take the ball away from people, every single opportunity on the field, I think, is looked at through a different lens. We talk to our players about, every single play is an opportunity for 11 people to create a takeaway, not get a tackle, not get a pass breakup, not get a sack, right? But to create takeaways for our defense. And at the same time, right, you want to be mindful of limiting the offense's explosive plays and none for touchdowns. I don't think in this day and age you're ever going to eliminate them, right? But if you can limit explosive plays and none for touchdowns, I think those two categories fit right in there with situational execution.
Yeah. To kind of piggyback off that, how as a play caller on defense do you balance risk in big moments? And when you're taking, I think the interesting thing is like big moments on offense, big third down, like you don't have that many, like 3rd and 10, you got to throw the football on offense, but on defense, you can drop 8, you can bring pressure, you can go cut. Like, how do you balance that in your mind when you're calling plays on the sideline? Real quick, before we get back to the podcast, I got to tell you guys about our new sponsor, Ekrin Athletics, man. Ekrin is one of my favorite products I've ever tried, one of my favorite sponsors of this podcast. Their new percussion massager is elite. The Kestrel percussion massager just launched, and it is their best massage gun yet. And I've tried a lot of these guns. There are several upgrades over their previous guns, which were already considered among the best available. This massager is extremely powerful, and it gives a deep tissue massage. Its angled handle design makes it easier to get to more areas, and the scrolling wheel makes it easy to adjust while you're using it. It has 6 speeds and 6 attachments, so you can really tailor it to your needs and to your muscle group you're targeting. I wish I had this when I was playing. I probably would have avoided some injuries, been more ready to play on game day, and recovered faster. Best part, I have a promo code for all of you to try Ekrin and their new massage gun. Use promo code NEXTUP for 25% off all orders on Ekrin Athletics. That's promo code NEXTUP for 25% off all orders. And guys, supporting our sponsors helps me a ton. So go support Ekrin Athletics. Use that promo code NEXTUP for 25% off your orders. How do you balance that in your mind when you're calling plays on the sideline?
I think that's kind of the special sauce, right, of what makes a good coordinator from a defensive perspective is we call them bullets on defense, right? You have different calls that are a bullet that you're going to throw out there, right? And you want to throw it out at the right time, right? And some of that is a situational down, right? A key third down or a red zone play or in 2-minute drive. But you got to be mindful of those things, right? What is the risk reward of being aggressive on defense? I think nowadays, when you look at the landscape of college football from an offensive perspective, people are doing such a great job with all the formations, all the shifts, personnel matchups. They're creating lateral and vertical space in the RPO game and all that stuff. And so, if you just let them bleed you down the field, they can do that. And so you got to be mindful of getting them off topic, right, or off schedule. And so from our perspective, that's something that we constantly want to be mindful of. But ultimately, I think when you recognize, okay, this formation on this down is an opportunity for us to maybe throw a bullet at them, right? And knowing that, they could do this or they could do that, and we feel pretty comfortable either way when that bullet is thrown, that we're, either going to create a negative play for ourselves or we're going to be in a fine position right on the opposite side. And so I think that's where you've seen teams that want to pressure a little bit, but they don't want to bring the house every time. That's why you've seen more simulated pressures over the last decade here. People want to bring somebody, but they still want to play a traditional 7, man spacing coverage. And so for us to be able to kind of utilize some of those simulated pressures, but then, you've got some zero pressures, you've got some man-free pressures, you got all those things. And so I think it's the fun cat and mouse game, right, that you go game plan for every week.
I could ask a bunch of ball questions right now, but we may start losing people.
Sorry,
about the simulated pressures. That's good stuff. Also wanted to ask about evaluating players. That's a big, obviously a huge part of your job as a head coach and now as a coordinator. You're saying yes to who you're bringing in the program. Are there a couple of things that you look for on film right away, regardless of position, to say this guy can play in our defense? And two-part, how do you also balance, kind of back to the risk of like the physical measurements being good versus high production on film? Because sometimes not always, now Bama gets a lot of those guys, but like you may have a guy that's got 33-inch arms at corner, but like isn't playing that well, but is he worth taking if he can run well? How do you evaluate those kind of players?
No, I think you got to have a certain, whether it be skill set on the field or measurables, we call them critical factors here, right? That you have to really abide by, and there's going to be some outliers to those things. Coach Saban, and I have talked about this a whole lot in the last few months because I wanted to know, he's probably arguably one of the best evaluators that there's been in getting player after player and draft pick after draft pick in this program once they were developed. And so, he said the measurables are the measurables, and you got to really stick to those things. But don't dismiss any one player for one thing. So, for example, if maybe they don't have quite the measurables that you normally take, but they're elite in a couple other categories, and they don't have a second trait that is below the line, whatever you want to say there. I think those are the guys, right, that you look at a little bit longer and go, okay, can we make this work? Because this guy has X, Y, Z, right, that puts him on a different category. But I think if you get too far away from, what you say you need from a measurable standpoint, that can be an issue. For us, I think Alabama has been successful here for a long time because we've had big people, right? As the game goes on, big people stay big, right? Those little fast guys, they may not be quite as fast in the fourth quarter, right? They get a little more worn down. And so for us, right, we want to make sure that we're staying long, that we're staying big, particularly up front. But the game has evolved even at the NFL level of if you're any type of defensive skill player, you have to be able to make space tackles, right? So, the days of having the 260-pound inside linebacker are the way of the dodo bird right now. You've got to have somebody that can make plays in space, that has great spatial awareness, right? And has the athleticism to stay with some of these offensive skill players that are very dynamic, right? In space as well. And so that's something that is very heightened for us. We're a very instinctive-based defense. We play a lot of vision-oriented coverage. Put your eyes on the quarterback, relate to routes, as the quarterback works into that. And so I think instincts are a really big piece of what we do. Great athletes with instincts, right? Everybody wants those guys, right?
How do you find
but
them?
we certainly put a premium, right, on making sure that, you can take a developmental guy every now and then that may not have those instincts in high school, but I don't think you want to build your entire roster with guys like that.
When you think about your coaching career, that's kind of led you to this point right here at the D coordinator at probably the best program in the country. Is there a moment where you think back to either you called a big break and something went your way, maybe you faced some adversity and you overcame it? What's kind of the moment that comes to mind? Real quick, guys, education has been a huge part of my life and my career. My undergrad degree at Penn State, my master's degree at UMass. That's why I'm so excited that Southern New Hampshire University has now sponsored the podcast. SNHU has so many different degree options. They have flexibility in how you get your degree. It's affordable. You can do it online. There's so many different options. It's a perfect way for anyone who's busy or anyone who wants to advance their career to get a leg up. I especially love their bachelor's degree in sports management. Anyone who wants to be in sports should look at this option because it's so affordable. And a degree from SNHU in sports management will give you respect in the sports industry. You guys can get more information by just putting in your email address and your name, maybe some special offers in the link in the description, or going to snhu.edu/Adam Breneman. The URL is on the screen as well if you're watching. That's link in the description, or snhu.edu/Adam Breneman. Put your email in, get some more information. And guys, supporting our sponsors helps me a ton. So would appreciate you guys clicking on that link and putting in your info just to get some more information. No strings attached. Go check it out today. What's kind of the moment that comes to mind?
Well, I think you look back maybe on Kalen and I, our time at Indiana. I think that was a special time. Indiana's football program historically has not had great success, and during my couple years there under Tom Allen, I thought we had some really great years and great success there. And I think maybe you turn some heads when you're able to execute at a high level and produce with people when you're going against people that have better resources and talent than what you face week in and week out. And I thought Kalen came in his year with us and did a tremendous job in that. And then I thought we developed that under Tom Allen in that time at Indiana from a defensive perspective. You know, I think my last year there, we had 5 first-team All-Big Ten players, the most in program history. I think our numbers were as good as they'd been in maybe 35, 40 years, something like that. So I was really proud of what we were able to accomplish there, especially when you consider who we were going against and the resources we were competing against. And then I think, you know, from an experience standpoint as a head coach, there's just things when you sit in the chair as a head coach that you learn that I think make you valuable as an assistant coach pretty much anywhere you would go.
How have you seen the game of football change over the past, you know, say like 5-10 years in just the scheme-wise, you know, from offense and defense? How have things evolved and changed from what you've seen? Because you've seen a lot of it.
Well, I mean, certainly there's plenty of changes outside of schematically the game right now, right? And so, you know, I was joking with somebody the other day that I think more things are changing right now than since the forward pass was invented right in the game. But from a schematic standpoint, I think people, you know, you're seeing a lot more formations the last 5-6 years. You're seeing a lot more of the pre-snap motions and movement. I think a lot of that spans from what you've seen in the NFL and the Sean McVay and what all those teams are doing out of condensed pictures. And then, you know, what is impressive to me is that teams are doing a great job of spreading you out laterally and vertically, both out of condensed pictures and using that condensed space, and then all of a sudden breaking people out with motions and wide expanding routes, or you know, they're, you know, like the, you know, Tennessees of the world, you know, Heupel, all those things, those types of guys that are really spreading everything out there and then finding, you know, one-on-one matchups in the run game. And so I think what it is forced from a defensive perspective is you're probably only as good as your weakest link, because offensive guys are going to find that weakest link and they're going to use that vertical space or lateral space to expose someone or isolate someone, right? And so those are the things that we have to be mindful of, which is where I think you're seeing a shift in the NFL and college to everyone from a defensive skill standpoint needs to have a certain amount of spatial awareness and athleticism to make those isolation plays.
Yeah. Awesome. The last thing I got for you, Coach, how do you guys define success in 2024?
Well, I think, you know, not to sidestep the question, right? But I mean, I think if we can stay, you know, relentless in our process, right? If we can continue to improve upon, you know, what has been the standard here, and then, you know, schematically, fundamentally, I think as a team, culturally, what we're doing, how we're evolving, right, from what has been here before, keeping the things, right, a lot of the same things that Coach Saban has done, and then adding the pieces that are the personality that's Kalen DeBoer. I think that's the secret sauce, right? That's the excitement, and I've seen our players really lean into one another. I think they're having fun playing the game of football right now. I think they've done a great job of buying into what we're doing offensively and defensively. And we have enough talent here to walk on the field and not be outmatched by any one opponent, right? And so if we can stay focused on our process and get better every single day, I think we'll have ourselves in position to be successful. But, you know, I don't know if I could put a number on it or a record or wherever, but there is a standard of excellence here, and that has to be shown up, and that's got to produce on game day. And you know, nobody in this building is skirting that mentality of what we need to accomplish on the field. Yeah,
awesome, Coach. Appreciate your time. This is great.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it. Roll Tide.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
That was awesome. Yeah.